Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy podcast. Each week, we expose the faulty foundational mindsets of the past and rebuild a newer, stronger foundation essential in creating your meaningful legacy. We've got a lot of work to do, so let's get started. As much as you like this podcast, I'm certain that you're going to love the book that I just released on Amazon, Fuel Your Legacy, The 9 Pillars to Build a Meaningful Legacy. I wrote this to share with you the experiences that I had while I was identifying my identity, how I began to create my meaningful legacy, and how you can create yours. You're going to find this book on Kindle, Amazon, and as always on my website, samknickerbocker.com. Welcome back to the Fuel Your Legacy show, and today we've got a wonderful guest. He helps people align their marriages using business principles and really focus their marriages on being successful, especially for entrepreneurs. I know you're out there, and if you're anything like me or most entrepreneurs, then there's always going to be a constant battle between how much is too much work, how much is too much family, and how do you create a good optimal balance there and make sure everybody feels important, valued, and loved. And that's what Riley's on here to talk about today. He's he was in the military, Utah National Guard for like 13 years, right?
Right.
Yep. And learned lots of skills there. And then he went and got certified as a counselor as well. So he's able to help people that way. So I'm super excited to ask questions and find out how can we become better in this area. But for you, if you want to just go ahead and introduce yourself, Riley, and go from like the beginning of where it all started to where you got to now, and why did you choose to be remembered the way you're building your life right now?
Okay. So, my name's Riley Beck. I live down in Belton, Texas now, which is in central Texas. I used to live up in Utah, but at about 17 years old, that's when I joined the National Guard. I've always been super busy. Even before then, I owned a little lawn care business, and thankfully I had parents that would help me out. My dad would drive me around town and drop me off at yards, and I'd mow yards. So always had some entrepreneur blood in me. Joined the military, and at that point, and then I deployed later to Iraq, and after a while I was thinking, man, I don't know that I want to keep doing this. And I thought for a while I might want to be a chaplain in the Army. And to do that, you have to have a master's degree in the helping fields. Well, so I went and got a master's degree in counseling. I guess a little short story there is I wanted to have summers off. I thought it'd be great to be a school counselor. But when I deployed to Iraq, they put me in the wrong. So I had already started school, taken a few classes, deployed to Iraq. And when I came back, they put me in not the school counseling program, but the mental health counseling side of things in that school in the University of Phoenix. Well, the class members told me, you know what, just own your own business. They said, if you want your summers off, just go ahead and start your own business and own your own business doing mental health counseling. You don't have to be a school counselor to have summers off. So they talked me into it. And that's kind of what led me down at least that part of the counseling path. Also in Utah, while we were there, my wife and I owned a beekeeping business. So it got pretty big. We had 800 to 1,000 hives, and we would take these beehives out to California, pollinate their almond trees and things like that. But my wife was working full time at BYU. I was in the National Guard, doing a lot more than just what they say in the 2 weeks, 3 weeks a year in the summer and 1 weekend a month. I was an officer, so I just had a lot of extra training. And then I was also doing some counseling on the side. We owned that beekeeping business. It was just crazy busy. So at that point in time, we just decided to consolidate, and I took a job down here in Texas. Well, I got a little tired of always working for the man. And like I say, I've had this entrepreneur blood in me. So that's when we started up. We've got a couple things going right now. We have some rental properties that we have. So that business has done quite well lately with the economy and with the just the housing market is super hot right now. And then I'm just in the startup phase really of this aligned marriage, to where I want to use some of those business skills that I've learned to speak to people that are already familiar with business skills, but are struggling in their marriage. So that they can, I guess, reap the benefits of their marriage. So many people are struggling nowadays. I mean, that the statistics are really terrible on divorce. The statistic most people know is that 50% of marriages end up in divorce. Well, that's first marriages. Of second marriages, 70% end up divorced, and of third marriages, 80% end up divorced. So, I'm trying to slow that down in the small way that I can, and then to allow business owners to, if they're inventors or whatever the product or the service is that they're doing, to be able to get it out there. If their home's falling apart, they just can't. They're not going to do as well in their business. So yeah, that's kind of what I do right now. Got a few things going on. Seems like we're always pretty busy that way. But
Yeah, that's awesome. It's funny. You've probably heard this before, but they always say that the number one leading cause. Well, let me ask you, because what would you say the number one reason for divorce is for most people?
finances. It's always finances.
It's not, though. It's marriage.
The number one what?
The number one reason for divorce. If nobody got married, we wouldn't get divorced. It's a joke. It's a joke. It's a terrible joke. It's a terrible joke. But you're right. It's finances. That's why I do finances, because I think my goal is to save marriages as well. So it's like, hey, like, why are you fighting? Why do you not have the time or the resources? It's not even about money. It's about, like, what is the problem? It's that you don't have the time to work on your marriage, or the resources to have the time or the resources to do what you need to do. So how can we help you get the time and the resources? And when you ask that question, generally it goes back to, I don't have money. So it's like, okay, well, how do we help you get some money then? But that's interesting, because I love the business aspect of it. I'm curious. First, I want to touch some points here, because I think it's fascinating. Although I've never joined the military, I have multiple clients and business partners who did and are in the military. Some have wanted to be a chaplain of different areas, and that's an interesting thing about you had to have a master's degree to do that. Why? I think why do they have to have a master's degree to be like a religious leader?
Because they're also providing counseling, basically. I think that's the biggest part of it, is because they want them to be, I guess, extra qualified to be able to help people. Because when folks in the military go to a chaplain, it is for religious things, but there's also some, there may be moral conflicts that they're having, while they're deployed, and different things like that. So they want them to be able to counsel with the person that they're talking to.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Again, I've never been in the military. I know in my current what I do to help people most often, I end up being. I never thought that I would be a counselor. When you're talking to people about how are they going to reach their goals financially, you don't think about that you're going to be dealing with such interpersonal turmoil. But then now that I've been doing it for so long, it just makes sense. It's like, okay, of course, like, money has nothing to do with money. Money has everything to do with the individual and where they're at in life. And I think that's with business, that's with anything. So a lot of my business coaching is really focused more around, like, are you okay as an individual? Because once we get you right, then your business gets right. And so it's interesting to hear the reverse there. I want to share two other things here before we jump into some more questions. Beekeepers, that was my first job. I'm actually up in Idaho right now, in the same town that I grew up in. And my first job, I actually was homeschooled. Started working when I was 11 years old. I didn't want to do homeschool, so my parents said, you either have to do schoolwork or get a job. So I was like, I'm getting a job then. I hate schoolwork. So went and started working in a honey extracting plant. So, like, I don't know if you did that as well as the beekeeping, but it was like full blown. That's a lot of hard work. Get those slides, all the boxes, make the medicine, transfer the bees. And then we would have to, I don't even know, it's so crazy to me that this even happened, but we would, as like 11, 12, 13 years old, I left when I was 13, but we'd move around 55-gallon drums of just straight honey all the time as a little 11-year-old kid. I'm sure if the government actually found out what was going on, they'd think sweatshop. I don't know, but I was grateful for the job, so I didn't have to do homework. But it's a fun industry. It's a fun industry.
Do you know the interesting thing? So we would outsource the honey production. We just didn't have the facilities when we got big enough. And luckily, there were some other people that did a great job of it there in Utah, up in American Fork. But the majority actually of commercial beekeeping is pollination services out in California. So you take those beehives out to California and they pay you a rental fee of, at the time it was about $180 to $200 a hive to leave it there for 2 to 3 weeks to pollinate their almonds. And then you'd go pick them up and bring them back across the, Nevada back into Utah. And then so honey was kind of like a byproduct. I mean, it was a little extra, but really the majority of the income, the revenue was made out there in California in those almonds.
Interesting. Yeah. Up in Idaho, I don't know if they ever took them all the way down to California, because we've got so much farming over here that they did a lot of.
Well, they do. They do, because those almonds bloom in about February. So they take them out there and then they bring them back there to Idaho by, April and May to start doing some of the orchards and other blooms there.
Interesting. Anyways, it was a fun industry. I enjoyed it. I'm grateful that whoever it was that allowed me to work that young allowed it. And I know I paid taxes. I don't know if they actually made it to the government or not, but I know they got taken out of my checks.
Yeah.
So I've been working for a long time and trying to manage this business and manage business and life. And I think one of the things that you said is really interesting, I want you to expound on, is that you knew, basically coming out of the military, you knew you wanted your summers free. How important is it, and this is kind of a broader question, but how important is it for a business owner, especially somebody who's trying to like align a marriage and align not just marriage, but with your kids and relationships, period, keep those in alignment while still maintaining your business? How important is it to know before you go into it what type of life you want to create?
A quote from one of my church leaders, one that's passed on long ago, but he said, "No success can compensate for failure in the home." And man, I just think about folks that'll dump a whole bunch of efforts into so many things, and then they lose their home life or their marriage and their children, and only see them every other weekend and things like that. I think that's extremely important to know before we go into any of that. And if the family is the focus, and that gives meaning and reason to what we're doing, then that the things that we do add upon that versus taking away from it. So if the family is a central focus in our lives, we're going to do things that are going to build it up. But if it's a byproduct to us, we're going to treat it that same way.
Yeah, I completely agree. I think that, and I know that when I see, because when you're in the business world, then you start to see more and more, you start becoming friends with more entrepreneurs. And it's interesting to see how many entrepreneurs, I would love to hear that statistic. I don't know if you know it, but because the general statistic is 50% of marriages fail, right? That's the general statistic. And this is what's interesting, is you will have entrepreneurs that are making money, and finances actually probably isn't necessarily the reason those marriages are failing. Like a lot of times it's almost that their businesses are doing so well that they get lost in trying to being drug along by the coattails of their business, just trying to keep up with what's going on, that they just get so busy doing other things and forget that they were married to somebody. So do you know the statistics on that? And then how do you kind of manage both, right? Because when I see my friends or the people I know getting divorced in business, my initial thought is I need to go home and I need to spend an extra hour. I'm up to 3 or 4 hours a day with my family now, during the day when they're all awake and happy. I'm every time one person gets divorced, that's another hour I spend in the house. I'm no, because my business isn't worth, no amount of money is worth me losing my family personally. That doesn't mean that that's true for everybody else, whatever they got to do with their own life. But I'm just curious, what are those statistics and how do we really prevent that? What are some tools or strategies that we could do or adopt into our lives to prevent divorce?
So I don't know the statistics. My guess is that they're really similar to the statistics I already said, about 50% in first for business owners and careers, whatever people are doing. I think it's about the same across the board. So I really don't know those statistics. I would guess, and from what I've seen, I'd say it's very similar. And then what do we do? So in counseling, a lot of times I'll use some Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. And, he's quoted all the time by like Stephen Covey and other business leaders, because he taught, and he quoted Nietzsche, and it says, "He who has a why can bear with almost any how." So we have to really address the why of why we're doing this. Why am I doing a business? Yes, it's to provide these services and this value for our customers, but also if we have our family or our spouse or our marriage is a vital importance of our why, of the reason why we're doing these things, then we're going to be serving that purpose. That makes sense. So going into a business with that in mind, and to be honest, most entrepreneurs, I think when they start out, it's to have a better life, not just for themselves, but for their family, and that if they're married, and if they're not married, they're usually looking to get married. I mean, that back to that joke you had about marriage. Why do most people end up divorced? Well, that's the crazy thing, right? People have a need just from birth to be close to people, and marriage is how we do it in our culture and in our religion and that kind of thing. So people, even if they fell the first time, they're likely to get married again the second time, and then a third time, and they'll keep trying over and over again, because marriage, even a rough one, is usually better off than loneliness and divorce. And well, sorry, more than loneliness, because that doesn't make sense. Divorce, but yeah, they'll take the chance again. So
Sure.
I hope that answered.
So what does alignment look like? If let's say, well, first let's talk about what what unalignment looks like, and then what does alignment look like?
So having consistent goals, right? So I guess one of the things that I push for in my counseling and with the marriage is for the couple to have like a weekly couples council, where they get together and they do, here's one of those business principles that works in marriage, is just doing a feedback loop, right? So here's what we learned this week. How do we build on that? And then, and this is coming from a book, Build, Measure, Learn. It's called The Lean Startup. And he's talking about entrepreneurship, but the same thing can be applied in marriage. So if, having a weekly council keeps your goals aligned, because you're saying, hey, I thought we had planned on this, or I thought, and then knowing how to communicate that helps. But if people will have an intentional weekly council with their spouse, they'll keep their goals, and their marriage aligned. It's just going to happen. But if you go too long without discussing the reason, the why, like why are we doing this? What's our mission? Reminding of the mission, the purpose, and the goals. Hey, folks can spread apart pretty quickly.
So what about in a situation where maybe it's maybe not too late? I hate to say the word too late, but they're down the pathway of really on two different pages. They've had a numerous amount of unmet expectations compounded over, we'll say, a year of time of just consistent unmet expectations, to the point where it's difficult for them to communicate because their realities have become so separate, so different. Like all they see is what the other is failing in, or where the other person is falling short from their expectations, that in this feedback loop, it's actually harder to communicate, because they're just not, like, it always ends in a fight, or it always ends in contention, or you're right, you're wrong, this pitter patter, rather than actually being productive. What are some ways to curb the emotional aspect of something and really increase the productive nature of the feedback loop?
So it's a really good question. At first, they've got to have the desire, right? If what you sounded like, that's two people going two separate ways. Both of those people are going to have to want to bring it in. They both have a choice in a marriage. And if one person wants to keep going, even if the other person wants it, then it's not going to work. So eventually both of those people have to come to a decision that they want to fix or improve their marriage. So that's the first thing.
I agree with you, but I'm going to give you some pushback, because if you go talk to these individuals who are in this situation, oftentimes in my experience, because I'm meeting with them, I mean, they're clients of mine, right? So they actually think that they have the same goal, and they just think that the other person can't see it. But if you talk to both of them and you say, okay, this is the objective, they say, okay, you're right. Everybody agrees this is the objective. But then their belief of how to achieve the objective are just different.
Mm-hmm. Let me give you an example of that. So this is a principle that's kind of taught in emotionally focused couples counseling. So what you usually have here is you have two people. You have one person that's an anxious clinger. So that person is the person that's, hey, let's work this out. Let's talk. Let's figure things out. And that person, you're talking about the similar goals, right? Sure. That person wants to work the marriage out. But then you also have the second person is called a detached avoider. Okay. So anxious clinger, detached avoider. Almost all couples fall into this. They both want the same thing. They both don't want to argue. They don't want to fight, and they want to fix things. Okay, so the detached avoider says, wait, the fight, every time we talk, we fight. I just don't even want to talk anymore. Let's just not even do this. So they detach and they avoid. What's the reason and the purpose? Is because they want to fix the marriage. Anxious clinger now, same purpose, the same why, right? They want to fix it. But this anxious clinger is like, let's fix it now. Let's do this. But because they're clinging and they want to, because anytime they attempt is tenuous and a lot of tension, the detached avoider is leaving, and the anxious clinger is just trying to hurry and fix things. So they both want the problem. And when a third party like you or I can come in and just say, all right, you both are going for the same thing, but the way you're going about it is kind of messed up. And you can educate them and show them that, hey, both of you are trying for the same thing to decrease tension in your marriage, but the way that you're doing it is not working. And here's how to resolve that. And I could go for hours of how to resolve that.
Well, let's not go for hours, but I would like a little snippet of because I just know there's a lot of people in what you described, like a significant amount of people. So if they even had what's the first step? We don't need the 3-hour long dissertation, because they need that eventually. Somebody needs to help them. But what's the first step? How do we get to the point where we realize, okay, this is where we're at, and this is the first step to healing?
Well, the first step is educating them and showing them that. And then if they're willing, one of the first things I do is get them both to commit to me and to themselves to do what's called a 5-to-1 ratio. This is Gottman. He was a marriage psychologist guru. Anyways, he basically finds out that the statistics are phenomenal of these folks that will do 5 positives to 1 negative interaction. They almost always succeed in marriage. But what happens is, in that example I was just talking to you about, a lot of times people get that inverted, and they'll have 5 negatives to the 1 positive. So if I can get them to commit and to start working towards that 5-to-1 positive, it's incredible what starts to happen, right? They start feeling safer with each other, and then they start enjoying being around each other. And just by changing that one thing. And then similarly, the business has something similar called the Losada line. And that's where, it basically it's 6-to-1 positives to 1 negative in the business field. And people, employees want to stick around, And those businesses are the most successful. They can get by with a 3-to-1, 3 positive to 1 negative, and they can get by all right. But optimal is 6-to-1. But if people are willing to just give that a try, that 5-to-1, 5 positives to 1 negative, just to restrain themselves a little bit from throwing out all this negative into their relationship, it's phenomenal what happens and how fast things start to turn around.
Okay, so I love that. I think anybody who's listening to this, try that. What happens when? Again, I'm being the devil's advocate here, because these are questions that I have. I'm like, I don't know how to help certain scenarios. So I work a lot through this. But so if you're listening to this, think, man, these are really specific questions. I've never thought of that. That's okay. This is what goes through the counselor's mind. Even though I'm not a counselor, I studied neuropsychology. So different field, but still had to go through similar classes. So what happens in the phenomenon? Okay, so I would say it's the most prominent, is what I'm going to talk about. Most prominent in the realm of politics or religion, religion. When I say religion, between different religious groups. Okay, but where one person believes that it really comes down to a simple love language, probably a love language communication. But one person believes that what they're doing is positive, and the other person is perceiving that what one person believes is positive as negative, and they have this miscommunication. I'll use a personal story for myself, just because I can throw myself under the bus and not feel bad about it. So I was on my mission. I'm a Latter-day Saint, and I was on my mission in Scotland and Ireland. And I had this companion who we were out teaching the gospel, Northern Scotland, beautiful. And this companion of mine, he was from England. Now, there's some different communication styles. I'm from more like rural farm town Idaho, and he's from inner city England. It was either Manchester or Birmingham, I forget. Point is, my form of communication is like rough, tut, rub some dirt in it, get on with your life, right? And that's how I treat men, right? I was raised that this is an effective and appropriate, and not just effective and appropriate, this is a respectful way to treat a man, is like treat him like a man, like he's tough and he's rough, right? And to treat a woman, it's softer, but out on the farm, even the way you treat a woman out on the farm is more rough than you treat most city slickers, okay? And that's not like to say anything bad about anybody. It's just there's a different levels of what nice is and kind. And so I'm obviously from this rougher background. He's from a different background. And so I'm just like giving him what I think is helpful, right? I'm helping him, lovingly encouraging him, whatever you want to say, all the best intentions in my mind. And he's like, you're so rude. You have no empathy and whatever. I'm just like, no, I don't know. Like, explain to me how you'd like me to treat you. And so then he starts explaining to me how he'd like me to treat him. I was like, I would feel that I would be like, that would never cross my mind, because treating you that way would be so incredibly disrespectful, to treat another male human being the way you're asking me to treat you. That's even more soft, pandering, enabling from my perspective than I would even treat the women where I grew up. Like, so are you asking me to treat you like a woman, right? Because again, this is from my limited, very young 18-year-old mindset. Okay, so, but I think this happens in marriages, business partnerships. It happens all the time, where one person, they actually think they're lovingly helping. So you can say just positive 5-to-1, but then what if one person thinks what they're doing is positive is actually negative 5-to-1? Does that make sense? That kind of contrast there. And then how do we rectify that so we're actually improving it and not compounding the problem?
All right. So, you brought up the 5 love languages. So I'm going to go there for a minute.
Sure. Yeah.
So basically the principle of the 5 love languages is that there's these 5 love languages. They're service, gifts, touch, words of affirmation, and quality time. So, and basically what it says is the way that I feel loved is the way that I'm going to show love. And that's how we do it with our spouses, right? So mine is service. Without a doubt, it's service. So, when someone helps me out with gardening, pulling some weeds, with something like that, they're my best friend. Same thing with my wife, right? When she's helping me out with some kind of project I have going on, man, things are going smooth. But hers is not. Hers is quality time. So we've got two different people. So I might be serving her or doing something like that, but she wants to sit down and just spend some time or go out to eat or something like that. Both are we both feel that this is how you show love. So a little bit of education, right? Just what we're doing right now, providing education. When people start to realize this, and start to show love in the way that the other person feels it, that they can influence that person to feel that love a lot more. Back again to kind of this aligned marriage idea of what I'm doing here, the same thing works in business, right? If I have a product, the beekeeping, I used to have these 80-pound boxes, right? And I'm like, this is the way to go because you can standardize. You pull these 80-pound boxes, young guys like you are sitting there putting it in, saves you money. They're all the same size instead of putting these little dinky boxes, to have the honey in. I'm like, this is the way to go. No, that's not how you work in marketing, because Jane down the road, she wants a little 40-pound box to lift off of her hives. And if I'm marketing and I think my way is the best, and I do that in business, my business is not going to be very successful, because I'm trying to impose what I believe on the customer versus finding out, this build, measure, learning what the customer wants. So I think you nailed it in sitting down and asking, when you asked your companion that, like, hey, all right, what is that? That's where the gold comes in. And that's when we do research in business. We do research back in these family councils and say, hey, what works for you? The feedback loop. Hey, what went well this week? And guess what? 5-1. Give me 5 positives and 1. We're going to do this, by the book, 5-1, because we're going to create it to be safe. And when we do that, sorry, I'm kind of losing my train of thought here. But when we ask the other person, ask the customer, or ask our wife or our spouse or husband, hey, what's working well? Then we can reinforce that the next week and the next time.
Yeah, I love that. One of the things I speak on stage about is becoming the CEO of your own life, and I really believe this, that your shareholders, any person's shareholders, are the people in at least in their life most. If you're married, though, your shareholders are your spouse, and if you have children, then they're your children. And that's like, yeah, it's great to go run a business. I don't care if you're working for McDonald's, right? You're the CEO of your own life, and you made that choice to go work where you're working. And that is the income source, right? If you're a CEO, you've got to say, okay, where's the income source and where's our fulfillment? And how are we fulfilling to our shareholders? How are we taking the profits from the company and feeding it back to the shareholders? Because that is literally your job. The board of directors and CEO, like, your job is to maximize shareholder profits. That's it. Like, so you got to cut the slack everywhere else and how to maximize the shareholder profits. Now, in a family or a marriage situation, the shareholder profits are not distributed often in finances. They're distributed in experiences, connection. They're distributed in different manners, but you still have to say, how are we turning this profit or this money generating activity into shareholder profits? And how are our shareholders recognizing profits? Do they want equity? Do they want cash? Do they want a dividend? Like, what type of profit is this specific shareholder looking for? Because you got different types of shareholders in a business. And so understanding that as a CEO, you're the CEO of your own life, and you got to be conscious of that. If you're a child, your parents are partially your shareholders, the people who care about you. Like, anybody connected to you is ultimately your shareholder. Now you can choose to care about what some shareholders want, or you can even say, no, you don't get to be a shareholder, right? That's a blessing of, I don't know necessarily of being an official CEO, but when you're the CEO of your own life, you get to choose who your shareholders are and who you allow to be a shareholder in your life. And then you can ask their feedback, take a vote, right? They do this in business all the time, as you mentioned. So I think that's huge principle when you're aligning yourself, is that feedback loop. And I don't know that enough people are employing it. I know that for myself, I probably do it more than I believe I do it more than others based on what I've seen, but I still probably don't do it enough. I probably don't check in enough with my wife. Even just 2 or 3 days ago, Charlie is my wife, and she was having a little bit of a hard day. And I was like, what's going on? Why all the shortness? And she's like, well, you're being short too. I'm like, okay, maybe I am. I don't know. I don't feel like I am, but like, let's talk it out. And it comes down, she's like, well, I want you to help more around the house. I was like, okay, well, what do you want me to help more with? Like, let's make a list, because I don't know. Like, from my perspective, last time we had this conversation, I've like 100% increased my efforts around the house. So if it's still not enough, then clearly we both have different expectations of what is enough, and that's fine. So I'm tracking it now on my business daily indicators, and I'm tracking my other actual business like lead indicators. I'm now tracking, did I change the kids' diapers today? Did I do the dishes without being asked? Did I put them to bed? Did I did I play with them? Did I interact with them? Or did I come home and was I on my phone? Like, I'm tracking all of this stuff for me so that next time we have this conversation, I can say, here, this is where I'm at. Are you saying it needs to be better? Like, let's talk, right? Because now I've tracked it. I know what I've done and I know what I haven't done, and we can actually have a conversation. I'm like a super technical guy though. So I really like being able to see progress. So you might not pull out an Excel spreadsheet to track whether you changed your kid's diaper that day or not. But I sure did, because that's how I track and like can visualize whether I'm improving or not. But you got to find a system that works for you, that has a daily feedback, or in your case, a weekly feedback, and say, how am I improving, or am I not,
Yeah, I think we're getting a daily feedback kind of all the time, but I think a structured weekly feedback helps. That's where we're going in there without, on those daily ones, you caught each other when emotions were high, and sometimes defensiveness can come in, and what Gottman calls these four horsemen of the apocalypse, the criticism, and things like that. Hopefully not contempt, and then stonewalling. That's the person that just wants to get out. But sorry, I'm rambling. But if we catch each other just during the day, sometimes the point gets missed, right? We're in such a hurry. But if we have a set time during the week to sit down, for us, usually on a Sunday night, and then we also go over calendars, different things, then we get a chance to say, hey, this is working, this is not. But by the way, these 5 things you did worked well. And that reinforcement, for someone like you that's been tracking these on a spreadsheet, and then you hear 5 of these things checked off that was noticed went well, it's going to feel good, and that's naturally going to reinforce and probably motivate a person to do more.
Yeah, no, I love it. Good things for me to improve on as well. So if somebody wanted to chat with you, maybe they're struggling in their marriage, or they're just struggling in business, and they were wondering, hey, how do I maximize my own psychology, my human psychology? How do I discover what my habits are so that I can now change them if I choose to? Where would they go to contact you?
So best way is to give me a call, or they can go to my website and put in an inquiry there. Phone number is 512-600-2554. But yeah, just get a hold of me, and we'll just, do a discovery session and see what's going on. I don't usually work with, so I do therapy and stuff on this, as a career also. With this aligned marriage, I'm not necessarily doing the really intense stuff, when marriages are really, really struggling. So if that's where you're at, you could call me, and I might give you a referral to a good therapist that I know, or a couple of them. But what I'm trying to do is help, business owners, entrepreneurs to use business principles that they're already familiar with to improve their marriage. So yeah, that's the best way to get a hold of me, though. Phone, awesome. Email.
What's your website?
It's alignedmarriage.com.
Awesome. Yeah, no, another funny story about the transfers of business into personal relationships. This was like, it was about a year and a half after we got married. First year we got married, March. My wife's birthday is in July. And so we were out doing summer sales that year. And so it was like a day off for me, her birthday. And so I like treated her, sent her to the spa for half the day, came home early, we went out. Like it was a big ordeal. And unbeknownst to me, birthdays are a big deal in her family. Birthdays in my family were just like, it was another day. And so the reason I celebrated her birthday was more self-serving of like, I want a good day off, so we're going to go have some fun, right? It'll be like your day, but it's going to be fun for me as well. And well, then the next year, her birthday was like on a Tuesday or something. I was like, I'm not taking work off on a Tuesday. Like, we'll freaking celebrate the week before. We went out to dinner the week before. Like, I was just like, why would I go do any of that? And anyways, like a week later, she was very, very upset that I did not celebrate her birthday. And I was like, I don't know what you're talking about. Like, we went out to dinner the weekend before. She's like, yeah, but the day matters. So like, why does the day matter? Anyways, so we're sitting there talking about this and having kind of an emotional conversation as far as like, who's right or wrong. It's like, well, both of us have emotional wants. So an emotional argument's not going to work for Sam. For some people, it works. It moves mountains. For Sam, that's where I shut down. Like trying to emotionally manipulate me. Nah, not interested. But then because she's been married to me for a year now, and she's seen me work in a business, and she says, "Hey Sam, when your mentors at business, when they say you need to adopt this new habit, or when they say you need to read this new book, or whatever, anything like that, you freaking do it immediately. Like you don't even waste a second of time. You come home and you say, hey, this is the new status quo, right? It's done. But then when I'm saying this is going to improve our marriage, why is all the pushback? And it was right there because I try to be as principled as possible. I'm not perfect, right? Nobody is, but I like to, if I can apply a principle across everything, then I choose to live by it. If I can't, I generally discard it. Like I just don't even bother with it. Well, in this scenario, she tapped into the principle of constant improvement for me. And I was like, oh, done. Birthdays are now the coolest thing on the planet for me. And they will always be celebrated simply because she learned to speak my language. And it wasn't that I didn't want to celebrate her birthday, is that I didn't want to be emotionally manipulated. And once she communicated that it wasn't about that, it was about the principle of constant growth, I was like, I'm in, right? So I think that it's absolutely true. I've seen it work in my own life. When you take the business principles and apply them to your home life, you're just going to be happier and more successful, in my experience. I can't promise anybody success in life. You got to do it yourself. But
and if only more people could see, that instance that you brought up, those failures and that one negative, again, back to that 5-1, that one negative is not necessarily a negative. It's just feedback. It says, hey, this did not go well. Here's something we can improve on. Mm-hmm. So many people think that if they argue or if there's a disagreement, that's bad. Absolutely not. That's just opportunity for growth.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So this is a section of Legacy on Rapid Fire. 5 questions, 1 word, 1 sentence answers. Okay. You ready to go?
1 word or 1 sentence.
1 word to 1 sentence. No more than 1 sentence, but it could be 1 word. You'll understand when I ask the questions here. But what do you think is holding you back from reaching the next level of your legacy today?
Lack of technology skills.
I can relate with that one, my friend. I can relate. What's the hardest thing you've ever accomplished?
Successful marriage.
And what would you say your greatest success to this point in your life is?
Successful marriage.
Awesome. What's one habit, secret habit, mindset, or behavior that we could all adopt into our lives that would guarantee our success?
This is from one of my favorite books, The Obstacle is the Way.
That is a fantastic book. Well, let's talk, because this is the next question. What are 1 or 2 books you think the Fuel Your Legacy audience could definitely benefit from?
So obviously, The Obstacle is the Way, The Lean Startup, and Extreme Ownership.
All fantastic books, guys. All of them are fantastic. So here's the final question, my favorite question, the reason I do this whole podcast. So this is, what legacy are you building? So we're going to pretend that you've died and that your great-great-great-great-grandchildren, 6 generations from now, they're sitting around the dinner table discussing your life, the impact you had, and the legacy you left. What do you want them to be saying about your legacy 6 generations from now?
I would want them to be reading an article that someone wrote of how their marriage was improved. And the way that we taught our children to value, I guess, I would want them to talk about the way that I taught my own children and how that was passed down through the generations. My children get to see, watch these entrepreneurship endeavors that we do, people that we help, whether it's, we have that other business through some rental properties and things like that. And they're already picking up on ways that we've created value in the world. So I hope they'll recognize some of these things that I can leave behind, especially improved marriages, and relationships, close relationships.
Awesome. Love it. Hey, thank you so much, Riley, for coming on the Fuel Your Legacy show. And thanks for sitting in the hot seat. I know I drilled you a little bit harder than most, but these are questions that are important to me because I see these happening more and more in business. The more and more that I expand myself and meet more entrepreneurs, then I see that it happening more in entrepreneurs' lives. So I think it's important. It's an important message to be shared, and I'm grateful that you're out pounding the pavement sharing it.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. I'll talk to you guys later, and we'll catch you guys next time on the Fuel Your Legacy show. Thanks for joining us. If what you heard today resonates with you, please like, comment, and share on social media. Tag me, and if you do give me a shout out, I'll give you a shout out on the next episode. Thanks to all of those who've left a review. It helps spread the message of what it takes to build a legacy that lasts. And we'll catch you next time on Fuel Your Legacy.